Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Voices of PropTech, brought to you by VendorPM. I'm Emiel Bril, the CEO and co-founder of VendorPM. This podcast has been a long-standing vision of mine and our team, and so we wanted to create a platform to amplify the most influential voices in PropTech and hear their views on the state of the industry and their vision for the future. And so each month, I'll be chatting with an industry leader to bring you their unique insights and key perspectives on what makes or breaks success in PropTech. So tune in for lessons and takeaways from buyers, advice from founders, and expert opinions on how technology is revolutionizing real estate in 2025 and beyond. And so without further ado, let's dive right into the episode. Okay, well, good morning, everybody. We'd love to kick things off here with Courtney Cooper, who started her career dream, moved into the PropTech venture world, and is now a partner at Alate, as well as the co-founder of the PropTech Collective. Above all else and above all of that, Courtney has also become just an incredible friend and just an incredible person to know as we grow this journey through VendorPM and as I grow through becoming a founder and a CEO in this space as well. Fun fact, I'm not sure if Courtney, you knew this, but according to ChatGPT, you're actually part of the top 10 most influential women in Canadian PropTech history. In fact, you were actually the very first one that came up. I'm not sure if you knew that, but it was just a fun fact that we found as we were prepping for this podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Emiel. I'm honored to be one of the first guests on the podcast and to start 2025 with you.
Amazing. Likewise. So to kick things off, myself, the audience, we'd love to learn more about your professional journey and your personal journey, really the experiences that have led you to your current role at Alate, but also just to this moment in time, to the successes and the learnings that have took you to where we are today.
You mentioned that I started my career at Dream. So when I started, I was in the corporate services group. Very exciting, but it actually housed technology, HR, risk, a whole bunch of sort of the operational aspects of the business. And it was an interesting time when I joined. It was 2012. And we were trying to figure out how do we make the business more efficient and what does that mean and how much of that is process and how much of that is technology. So early on in my career, I did a big deep dive into what technology real estate companies were using. And we were working with what Dream was doing. We talked to all the other sort of large Canadian real estate owners to try to understand what was out there. And, not much. You had sort of the big accounting systems. Maybe some people were using Salesforce. I think the sort of leading companies had cleaner data and had been thinking about data earlier. But at this point, the landscape looks nothing like it does today. Some of the big names in PropTech, when you think about them, they were getting started. Maybe the 2010, maybe earlier. Of course, you have the Yardies, the JD Edwards. There was technology, but there wasn't thousands of companies or tons of entrepreneurs that were investing and building in this space. So it led to a massive project where we did a big process optimization and looking at how we did things, but also we built an internal software development team and we're building some of the software that exists today. So things like trying to build a database and a platform where you could see all of the buildings, see who all the people that were associated with that, see all of the facts about the buildings, pull up the rent rolls for leasing, be able to actually do it in a digital way. Because at that time, we were using PDFs and emails. And so we automated that platform and did things that now VTS replaces today. So we built a team and I was lucky enough to be a part of that team and sort of involved in sort of all aspects of the strategy around what we were building and being part of sort of the design and working with the business around what the requirements were for different aspects. I had more different parts as we were building that team and then we built a team of 20 that was a software development team of 20. And so it was really my introduction to tech. And although I obviously wasn't the one building software, I played a lot of roles and it's what sort of put my career on the trajectory it is today.
Interesting. You bring up an interesting point around build versus buy, which we can come back to later, but that's a pretty frequent debate that you hear when chatting with CIOs across the real estate and PropTech space. But before we get to that, when I think about even my journey, whether it was, starting in window cleaning or getting into VendorPM, and there's just these key moments where there's some learning or some event or something that has happened that's this aha moment. And in hindsight, it becomes this inflection point that essentially dictates or determines the trajectory of your career, of that next chapter in your life. Were there any key moments or highlights that when you look back were these aha moments, these inflection points that defined where it is that you are today?
Yeah. So I think when I think about the highlights of my career, maybe this sounds corny, but it really goes to the people that I've had the opportunity to work with. When I was at Dream, I think it was a very special time. There was an incredible group of people that were here, and we worked in the office, and people ate lunch in the lunchroom and went out for drinks after work, and it was a great culture. And many of those people now are leaders at Dream or are leading companies across the industry. So I think there was excellent people that were there, and I learned a lot from all of them. And then, specifically on the development team that I was working on, and we were trying to figure out what to build. We had the pleasure of working with one of our board members, who's the CEO of Click Health. He was extremely involved. The whole team was great, but I think what was the most sort of meaningful to me and different was the way people thought. I went to business school. I had a more traditional business training. And so for me, it was meeting people who, thought in a different way, sort of thinking about design thinking, thinking about what do people really need when you're building product, systems thinking, design thinking, all these types of terms I had never heard before. And, there was a lot of sticky notes and things like that. And just ways to think about how do you really understand the problem and not jump to solutions. A lot of things like that for me were new at the time. And it really triggered me to want to think a different way and learn how other people thought that was different than me. And so I think that really grew my respect for product and design in a way that has changed the way I think about product and investing in companies.
Okay, so a lot of the inflection points, so the key drivers that catapulted you to where you are today is just ultimately learning from those around you.
Yeah.
I find this interesting because personally, I assume I'm the dumbest in every room that I walk into, and that's how I find that I learn the most. But do you have any techniques or tips in terms of how you can learn the most from those that you're surrounded by, no matter where you are, what you're doing?
I think it's easier said than done, but not being afraid to ask dumb questions. I think some of the smartest people, CEOs, all the time, they ask, why are we doing something? And really push people to understand not just, the canned answer of like, this is why we do it, but why does it have to be done this way? Or I've seen really smart people ask, a question of like, why do we calculate that metric that way? What is it that we care about? And, I think just in general, if you don't know something, like asking, or something doesn't make sense, trying to understand. And I think we all want to, or at least I want to seem like I know what I'm talking about, or you have this like instinct that you don't want to come across those dumb or ask them questions. But a lot more often than not, really good conversations can come from the simplest questions.
Yeah, and it also humanizes people. It humbles you, right? Like when you're asking a question that people just assume maybe you know the answer to, it's like, oh, okay, like we're both learning here. And to your point, I think that creates for a much better conversation and opportunity. So just coming back to sort of your career and trajectory, despite those early days and chapters at Dream, which obviously were foundational to Alate and everything else that you've done, that doesn't necessarily cement you getting into venture and you getting into PropTech, ultimately the intersection of technology, real estate, and venture. You could have gone any which way that you chose. So what drew you towards real estate, technology, and venture when, again, the world was your oyster, every option was available to you?
Yeah, so after Dream, I ultimately decided to do a program at OCAD, which is our design university in Ontario that's focused on design thinking and strategic foresight and all sorts of words around how to use design and apply it to business. And so for me, it was a part-time program. I ended up joining Great West Life, an insurance company that I was building an innovation team and also has a large real estate aspect of the business. And I did projects there that were related to health insurance, group insurance, individual insurance. But also, I kept getting pulled back into real estate. And so I learned a lot being in an even larger company. Great West Life was a 115-year-old company that was trying to go through a massive change to the way they operated. So that was a really good learning experience. I got a lot. We had an amazing team. It was sort of a team that was designed by consultants. So you had an anthropologist on the team, you had designers, you had business people. It was a really interesting place to learn. And then shortly after that, I was sort of looking for my next thing. And that's when Dream and Alate Ventures were establishing Alate. So they had already got that started and were just starting to build the team. And I had the opportunity to join in the early days as we were figuring out what exactly Alate would be. And so I just felt like everything, I guess, kept pulling me back into PropTech. And I thought that I had the opportunity to be on teams building products. And I really understood the real estate side. So when they were looking for somebody to join or start just building the team at Alate, it was exciting to be able to think about how do you invest in a lot of the things that we were trying to build. And to your point, sort of where should this type of technology be built? Should it be built internally in real estate companies? I had been part of that and saw the pros and cons of that. And I had been involved in implementing technology. And so I was really excited for the opportunity to work with companies that were dedicated to building like more focused technology and sort of helping them grow. So that was 6 years ago. And now I've been investing in prop tech companies since then.
Well, I'm very happy that you did, because I remember, I think it was year one. I think it was, year one of VendorPM. So this is towards the end of 2020. Came across Alate's website and I saw the work that you were doing, the companies you had invested in, the networks that you had built, and of course, the fact that this was Canadian and in Toronto in our backyard. I think that's really unique. I don't think that anything else like this exists in Canada, especially for Canadian prop tech. This is such a compelling alternative. And I just knew the moment that I went through the site and came across Alate for the first time that this is the group that I want to work with. So very, very grateful that you did. But when you started with Alate and you started in venture and prop tech, I'm curious what it is that you look for, not just in a company, but in the founders and the team, and also how that's evolved, because just as everything else has been a learning in and of itself. And I'm sure that your opinion of what it is you look for has been polished and grown over the years as well.
Yeah, for sure. So Alate Ventures was Dream's partner when they first created the joint venture to start Alate. And so I was working in the office with them. The partners there had decades of experience investing in early stage technology companies. So I had the opportunity when I started to learn from people who had been doing this for a very long time and had been very successful in companies like Ecobee, for example, which touches the prop tech space and so is one of sort of the things that pique their interest in prop tech and real estate technology, but also in Touch Bistro and Greenlight and all sorts of companies that are amazing. And they'd also learned a lot of things for companies that didn't do as well. And so I got to see and learn from that. And so I think we took a lot of those learnings, but then also adjusted for prop tech. But when we invest in the early stage, it is really about the people that we're investing in. Ultimately, if you're investing at the seed, there is, often a product and some customers, but it's really early. And, what you have to look at is sort of who is the original team, and is there a compelling vision for something that could turn into a significant market and a scalable business. And we ask ourselves a lot around, why is this founder at this time going to be the one to solve this problem? And how are they doing so far? And, do we believe that they're going to be able to inspire top talent to join them and attract early customers when they don't have the product or the capital to pay top dollars or have all the full features? You really need at the beginning to be able to inspire people to believe in you. And so just understanding what unique insights this person has, how they've built the team and been able to attract sort of those first believers. And then we do look at to try to understand what's the market, how have they approached the product and what they're built and their product roadmap, how have they got feedback from customers, what has the customer adoption and usage been, just understanding their larger vision, understanding what's unique and differentiated here. Do they have any competitive advantages that can be technology, although at the early stages in prop tech businesses, that's not necessarily that they have technology that nobody else has, but it might be their knowledge, their insights, and the reasons why they've come at this problem.
Interesting. And has that evolved since your early days in venture? In other words, how has what you look for changed over the years? And is there anything that you got wrong? In other words, you thought that X was really important at the start, but you realize as you've gone through prop tech and venture that actually that's not a relevant metric or a relevant data point to look at.
I mean, the last 6 years has been quite a lot of developments in the world and prop tech. 2018, 2019, everything went up. We had the pandemic. Things have got more challenging in the last couple of years, and so I think there's been a lot that's changed in venture across the industry in terms of what people look for and what companies need to look like at different stages. And it impacts us because, for example, what does a company need to be able to raise a Series A? That's something we need to be thinking about when we're investing at the seed. We also have seen the real estate industry continue to get smarter about software and become more challenging customers. It's harder to sell. It's been a difficult time for real estate, but before 2021 and in 2021, they were buying a lot of things that were nice to have. There was money to invest in innovation and technology. Now it's really around needs to haves, and getting a pilot or getting a sale across the line is incredibly difficult, and it has to be a need to have. So we don't underestimate the sales cycle and really try to understand and see what indications there are that this is a must-have product and solving a really important problem that real estate companies will buy. And I also think this hasn't necessarily changed, but I continue to believe that it's really important to have an understanding of the industry. That doesn't mean you have to come from the real estate industry, but I do think that surrounding yourself with people who understand the way the industry thinks can help you make sure that you're building the right product and really understanding the complexities and not overlooking something that's important that just might not be as obvious.
You're not just seeing the portfolio companies of Alate, you're very, very in tune with the entire market. Is there just this like X factor? Is there just something that clearly distinguishes those that succeed versus those that don't from the founder and the technology side?
We definitely see and have seen through sort of Alate and Relay and the companies that we're closest with, as well as other companies in the industry, that the team is incredibly important. And especially when people put through the test through the pandemic and changing conditions, you definitely saw some differences in the way that founders acted and were able to set priorities and keep the companies focused. And I think it's hard to know ahead of time. I mean, I think we do everything we can to do our diligence and try to understand the people that we're investing in and get to know them. But you really see people when they're tested, the way that they act and the way that they are able to make decisions under pressure and when there's not great solutions. And I think that often founders that are very, very clear on what the vision is and are able to prioritize their teams, because not always, but in most cases, you have a lack of resources and a lack of people. So it's ultimately, how do you figure out what is the most important thing for you and your team to be focused on at each time?
You read The Hard Thing About Hard Things. This is very much peacetime versus wartime CEO or leadership. And it's okay. So they can be great when money's free and dollars are flowing, but how do you lead? How do you articulate and set clear vision, priority, and focus during wartime? I understand. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. Now looking at it from the founder side, what are some things that you see founders typically get wrong? Maybe there's this common trend or pattern of founders that they have this assumption about the way something is or the way they need to raise money or go to clients, whatever it might be, but it's just something that they consistently getting wrong. And you wish you could just sort of like reach through the Zoom call and be like, no, this is the way that needs to be.
Well, I mean, I definitely don't think you can put all founders in one bucket, but I would say that just to our past conversation, sometimes we do see the assumption that capital or people will solve the problems. And that can be the case, right? Like there are companies where capital is a competitive advantage and a company's access to capital is what has allowed them to beat their peers. But I also think that especially at the early stages, there are many cases where too much capital in the early days allows you to overlook fundamental problems, to put marketing dollars or people at a problem and allow you to overlook issues with product market fit or sort of other issues that can be big, that can get bigger down the line. So I think that the right amount of capital, and assuming that, if we just have more capital or more people, that will solve the problem. And I think we've seen great companies have very efficient starts, and that sort of really, again, forces focus. And so it's not necessarily it's really hard to figure out the right amount of capital that a company can need. But I do think sometimes too much capital in the early days can create unexpected challenges. I also think sort of related, but not, is that like hiring too fast and firing too slow. So I think that great founders have to spend, people is the most important thing. That it is the product that you have. They're the people that are making up the decisions. And, I think often when you're scaling up, you hire very quickly, and, you just have to keep the bar really high and not compromise. And then the other side, whether it's an individual or just doing a layoff, I think a lot of times people wait too long. And, for individuals, I think sometimes if there's a problem, by the time you address it, it's something that's, other people in the organization have been dealing with for a while as well. And so, I think that can hurt others if, one person isn't pulling their weight. And then in terms of sort of the larger layoffs we saw, it's really hard and it's really hard decisions to make. But I think we see time and time again that, again, with efficiency and focus, teams can come out stronger from making some of those hard decisions.
Yeah, it's interesting. So hire slow, fire fast, but it's also almost counterintuitive how less resources forces you to be better, operate better, be more focused, and it sort of filters out a lot of the noise and gets to the true core of, is this the right team, product market fit, successful business, all of those things. Yeah, it's interesting. I think that's a pretty cool perspective. So when you think about the broader market and the trends that you're seeing, what are some of the current real estate trends that excite you, pique your interest, that Alate is focusing on right now?
So one thing that is, I think, pretty interesting right now is around sort of data centers and how that's changing. Obviously, AI is a huge topic of conversation and has been for the last couple of years as people are trying to figure out how to use it individually and within companies, within large companies, within startups. And that is an area that we are also have been focused on and working with our companies on what can you automate and how do we best use these tools and where are the use cases. What's pretty interesting is when you think about sort of the second order effects, it needs an astronomical amount of power, of the CapEx that's being spent, being able to build these data centers. It's pretty incredible what is going to be required if things continue on the path that we're on. And so I think if you think about it, the power demands for these data centers exceed 100 megawatts. People are talking about a gigawatt data center campuses, and a gigawatt is a massive. We're not there yet, but for reference, New York City consumes about 5.5 gigawatts. So just the numbers are massive in terms of the energy use, the water use. A typical data center uses the same amount of can use the same amount of water as 100,000 homes. So the energy demands for ultimately for AI and sort of where we're going are incredible. And so I think it'll be pretty interesting to see how those get built, how that actually impacts the sort of energy transition and the grid, and how and potentially forces us to address some of the energy challenges, because there are different incentives for the hyperscalers, the Amazons, the Microsofts, the Googles that need to build these data centers and need to address some of the energy requirements. So, we've been talking about sustainability and net zero and decarbonization, and I think it'll be interesting to see in this area if there are innovative solutions that come out. For us at Alate, we're not investing in data centers, but I do think we are continuing to look at AI and data centers, and where are the software companies that sort of support the infrastructure, or what are the different areas that are investable for us at the early stage and impact the real estate industry.
Yeah, that's where my mind was going too. So from a macro trends perspective, I think many people would agree with you. How does that actually translate into a seed stage prop tech company that Alate would invest into? So what could a company capitalizing on that trend look like? Just if you were to give an example.
Well, so I think there's two things. One was what's an interesting trend in real estate? So I think that's a pretty interesting trend separately. In terms of where we could invest, we'll see. We haven't invested in the space just yet. I think that you're seeing more hard tech type applications. We'll see on cooling for data centers, things like that. I wouldn't say that's for us, but I think that when you think about who are going to be dealing with these data centers, what kind of software do they need for the development and management and things like that, those are areas that we would look at. And then I think that obviously on the other side, we're seeing lots of companies that are using AI internally, or that have opportunities to leverage AI and generative AI in different ways. So we're looking at that as well.
Okay, interesting. All right, let's shift to the buyer side, the real estate side. Real estate is obviously a very interesting space, largely and generally known to be a later adopter of technology relative to other industries. In a perfect world, what would you like to see the buyers do differently, or what advice would you have for them that not just makes a better, easier experience for the prop tech companies, but generally would result in better outcomes for the industry as a whole?
Yeah. So, I've been there firsthand at multiple companies on the side. implementing software that we built and also implementing third-party software. And then I've seen this with our portfolio companies time and time again. And so I think for me, I think it's not underestimating the sort of change management that's required when you're changing the way that you do things. And that relates to process and technology. And I think that a lot of the tech platforms in prop tech, they have amazing capabilities, but companies don't get the full benefit or might not adopt. They might not adopt and really change their processes to get the most from it because they don't necessarily take the time up front to really identify what are their goals and what are they hoping for this change, this tech to help them achieve. And so being really clear on that up front, allocating the right people to help with the transition and sort of the transition, sometimes that's data, sometimes that's process, sometimes it's just, communication internally. There's a lot of things that prop tech companies can do, but I don't think that prop tech companies can on their, even the best ones. I think that you need both sides to be really good at change management and helping people do something new. And I think that the last piece is really around like leadership adoption. And so if you are using VTS or VendorPM or Altrio, any platform, the leaders need to integrate it into the meetings. They need to use, now this is what we use when we want to look at our leases, when we're looking at any vendors that we're using, actually pulling up those platforms in those meetings and making the new platforms the source of truth. And so that forces everyone to make sure that it's up to date because again, it's garbage in, garbage out. And if people sort of don't fully adopt technology, you aren't able to get the full sort of compounding benefits of it. So I guess to summarize, changing the way people do things, and I don't think you can assume that okay, we just bought it, we added our data in, so just go. And I know that it's not that simple, but I think that people underestimate how much work it is to sort of change mindsets and habits, and sometimes they miss out on the full benefit because they don't, have enough of that process around it.
Yeah, if anyone's just listening, I'm smirking from ear to ear because you hit on we've been doing this now for over 5 years. And the biggest challenge was not getting a contract signed, but it was getting, a successful implementation where we know they are getting every ounce of value out of VendorPM, right? And of course, they're getting value out of VendorPM, but are they getting the most? And over the years, what did we learn? There was really two key things, and you've essentially hit on them perfectly. The first is this instant top-down communication. Is this now integrated into our SOPs? Do you have the enforcement and adoption top-down from a leadership point of view? And is that being consistently reiterated, right? So I would call that communication ultimately. Then the second is ownership. So the most successful rollouts by orders of magnitude are those where there is somebody. It doesn't even have to be a project management office. It's just somebody who is the single point of contact that is the owner when there's questions or when there's mass data change or whatever it might be. There's just one person owning it on client's end. And of course, they have the owner on the vendor PM, and that's always going to be there. But those are the key top two things. And so really what we're talking about is leveraging or getting the max ROI from an implementation and a change management standpoint. Very valuable insights. What about from a buying cycle? So everything up to signing the contract. What is it that you think buyers need to do differently in the actual buying or the sales cycle?
I think there's a couple things. One I said is be really clear about what they're trying to achieve. So I think that there's obviously a lot of goals that everyone and different metrics that people are working on in their organization. And so trying to figure out what is it that we're trying to achieve this year when they're looking at software, getting clear on how they're going to evaluate different platforms. And, I think we talk about this a lot with different portfolio companies. I think a lot of times people want the perfect solution. If we're going to go from doing it paper-based or, in a platform we're not happy with, now we want everything. And I think really understanding, okay, which ones matter and the most and where can you sacrifice? Because I don't think you can always get the perfect thing today. But I think a lot of especially the tech, the early stage companies are getting so much better every week, every month, every year that a lot of the things you're looking for might be coming. And so trying to understand, do you need to hit every single box? Or which ones are you prioritizing? Because, I think that ultimately there might be a solution that checks every box today, but also is at the cost that you want. So I think that there's trade-offs in trying to understand that ahead of time, having somebody that's in charge of the process, then to your point, even leadership sponsorship. So being able to know that if we're doing all of this, is there going to be a budget for this? Is this a priority for the department? And that person being able to really clearly articulate the ROI up. And yeah, and I think that the having a clear process. So how are you evaluating companies? I think sometimes startups are lucky, and there isn't a proper evaluation. But I do think that from a real estate perspective, looking at a couple of options and to compare and understand what is out there and make the best decision for you. It's good to compare at least a few alternatives.
Yeah. And I'm happy you said that. That was definitely a difficult learning for me over the years. So, starting VendorPM 5 years ago, I don't know why now in hindsight, but I had a hard time asking buyers or prospects, do you have a budget for this? What is your process for buying this? When can you give me a commitment by? All these questions I felt, I don't know, insecure, or I just had a hard time asking those questions. And then, Ben, our VP of revenue, he came in and these are some of the foundational items that he started enforcing. And I just got very comfortable asking those questions, and it made the sales cycles a lot shorter. And it just boosted the sales process, the sales pipeline, to start to filter out some of the less serious buyers from those that are actually committed to a real solution. Those are foundational. I think that every founder should get comfortable asking those questions, which may seem difficult or even counterintuitive at first, but they're absolutely not. So here's a quick one. There's obviously a massive influx of PropTech companies over the years here. And so I think naturally we assume that there's going to be this excess supply in every area of PropTech than there is necessarily demand. I wonder if that's true. In other words, are there areas of PropTech that you see as currently being underserved, where you're like, there's a clear problem, where there's a clear trend, and there just simply aren't enough options in the market right now to satisfy these problems?
I think we're still at the beginning of sort of PropTech and technology adoption in real estate. So I think that there are areas where there's been sort of concentration. There's been a lot of people who have focused on property management solutions. And even in areas that I'd say have been crowded today, we're still early. And so, yes, in some cases, there are leaders and incumbents that, have been started in the last 10 years. But I think that there is opportunities in most areas still to create the right solutions at the right time. And I think that the industry in general is just incredibly early in tech adoption. So it feels like there's a lot more. And I think that part of that is there were so many companies that came out. A lot of them were funded. Many are getting consolidated or, aren't going to be the leaders of the future. And so I think that we're going to see better quality companies. We're seeing already consolidation in industry to be able to solve more problems for real estate companies. And we're seeing real estate companies trying to figure out this point solution versus platform challenge, and where they should allocate sort of capital and investment. And so I think hopefully we'll have some sort of newer platforms that are able to whether integrate or consolidate with others. So you have sort of more holistic platforms. So I think that will be what we continue to see. I think that when we think about larger trends that are impacting real estate, I think that one that I'm curious about is around aging populations and the changing demographics. And so how is that going to impact real estate, and what opportunities are there for companies to be able to facilitate just aging populations as it relates to real estate? So I think that's one that will be interesting to see over the next few years.
And the holistic solution that you hit on, I think, is an important one. I started to hear this word consolidation more and more, I think, post late 2021, where, like you said, there were people bought a lot of nice to haves or maybe a lot of shiny objects. And the consequence of that is you end up with a tech stack that's comprised of many point solutions. And the market is pushing us to say, if you can do with one login what we currently are doing with 3 or 4, we will buy your software. And so, that's been core to our product vision and strategy at VendorPM for some time. As you know, we started out with a marketplace. We built out e-tendering and bidding solutions. We then built out the vendor compliance and credentialing side. And in the next few weeks, we're releasing our contract management module. Why? Because that entire vendor lifecycle should live in one platform and not 4 different logins that don't integrate or talk to each other. So that's been resonating really well with the market as well. So I think that's a really important piece that we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah. And I think that there's a quote from the former CEO of Netscape that something like, there's only 2 ways to make money in business. One is to bundle and the other is to unbundle. So I think we go through different phases of, companies you get these holistic platforms, then they have deficiencies and they're not good enough. And so then there's value for point solutions or opportunities for people to solve a problem really well. But then, maybe we had a lot of that. And so we'll kind of continue to see that sort of fluctuate back and forth.
Yeah, that's a trend that makes sense. It's pretty interesting. So just to bring this home, what haven't we talked about? What is something that you could imagine our audience, whether you're on the buyer real estate side or on the PropTech side, is eager to hear, but we just didn't get to yet?
Well, I guess this one's a bit selfish, but I don't think I said this clearly. So I guess I'll take this opportunity to self-promote a little bit. But at Alate, we invest early stage, so technically in seed in Canada and the US. We're always looking for great founders. So if anyone is building in the space, feel free to contact me. My email is Courtney@alatepartners.com or on LinkedIn. We're always just looking for great founders, and we're really excited about what the next 2 years will bring. I think that there's some tailwinds that we're seeing, and maybe it's just because it's the start of the year, but I'm optimistic for 2025 and for the companies that are going to get built and for the progress that companies are going to make this year and the next few years. So just looking forward to the year and meeting a lot of great founders.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, I want to comment on that as well. I mean, look, we have a ton of incredible investors at VendorPM, and Courtney is absolutely one of them. And I think, Courtney, what makes you, Steph, the team at Alate so special is, I mean, of course you care about the business and the success of the business, but you genuinely and deeply care about me and the people, and that it's not fake. I genuinely feel it. I believe it. And the lengths that you go to help me, Ben, our team, it's so deeply appreciated. And we couldn't ask for. Courtney, this was a pleasure. Very grateful for everything you do for me, for VendorPM, and for the industry as a whole. We are better because of you. And I hope that everyone enjoys listening to this.
Well, thanks so much for having me on. Always a pleasure to speak with you, and it's been fun. We love working with VendorPM and the team. So excited for what's to come this year.
You and me both. Awesome.